Regarded as one of the best queen sacrifices of all time, this 1962 match between Nezhmetdinov and Chernikov is a piece of chess history, and a match you're just going to have to see for yourself, as the queen is sacrificed for a minor piece that leads to a raging attack and later a sweet tactical finish. So without further ado, let's get into the game. So we see some quite mainline theory: e4, the Sicilian defense with c5 on the board, knight to f3 developing, knight to c6, d4, the open Sicilian. After takes, it's quite an open game. It's going to be open lines. Normally, black will castle to kingside. White will sometimes usually castle queenside, and I will see a raging attacking game. That's not quite what we see here. Black goes for the accelerated dragon, an aggressive system. Knight to c3 developing. This is all standard stuff, been played before. Both sides getting their pieces out. Bishop to c4, eyeing up the f7 square. Castles, bishop back to c3, basically meaning the knight's probably going to come out and attack it, preemptively moving it so you don't have to do that in the future. And black has a choice here. He can develop calmly with a move like d6, but he can also get a bit more aggressive and go knight to a5, going after that light squared bishop, because it's normally seen that a bishop is a bit better than a knight. And if this bishop is exacting quite annoying pressure on that black king, you're also going to want to remove it. But instead, black decides to go after the dark squared bishop, because if you have this fianchettoed bishop sitting in that little sniper's nest, it's quite nice if you can get rid of white's dark squared bishop without losing your own. So that's what black is going for here. But of course, this knight is actually hanging and can be captured. So Nezhmetdinov just captures it. But now we see the idea of the move, because knight takes on d4, and you can't actually recapture that because the dark squared bishop would just kick you and you'd be down a piece. So we see queen to h4, and the position is very equal. Here we see queen to a5, basically threatening all sorts of things with this bishop. If this knight moves back, you could try and take on c3. After the pawn takes back, you would take with the queen. That would win the rook in the corner. So to avoid all that, you might want to castle. Nezhmetdinov does exactly that. He just castles out of the way of all that stuff. Of course, you can capture on b3, but Chernikov plays the best move, and that is bishop to f6, harassing that white queen. And here we can see a draw sometimes. This is almost equivalent to a draw offer, because you can play a move like queen to g4, the bishop would go back, and you can just return with the queen, and the players could just shuffle back and forth and make a draw. But that was not what happened in this game. After castles bishop to f6, rumor has it Nezhmetdinov thought for 30 minutes, and probably even more than that. After a very, very long think, Chernikov got up from the board. Nezhmetdinov was still thinking, and rumor has it he was on a walk when a young boy came up to him and says, "Sir, he sacrificed his queen." So immediately Chernikov rushed back to the board, only to see the move that Nezhmetdinov played. Queen takes f6. An absolutely bogus looking move. And even today, computer says this is an equal position, which might be thinking, oh, I only sacrifice my queen when it's winning. Well, to sacrifice a queen for a bishop and have the position be level is completely ridiculous. It just shows the amount of compensation white has, even with that. But black stayed precise. He decided to play the odd-looking move knight to e2 check, which looks very weird from the outset. But as we can see, with this c3 knight being so active, threatening to hop into d5, and maybe after the exchange and the bishop coming into checkmate, things will get very dicey for black. So you want to deactivate that knight first, even though you're going to be down a little bit more material. But that's because this knight is really a thorn in the black position, that's for sure. So knight takes c2. The queen is, of course, recaptured. And the knight hops back to its natural square on c3. Now black has a choice. He decides to go with rook to e8, just trying to threaten that weak e4 pawn. But it doesn't really matter. That pawn doesn't mean anything in the position. You can simply just go knight to d5, because if black wants to capture, you have knight to f6 check, winning back that rook immediately with a winning game. So knight to d5 played. Black decides to go rook to e6, just to defend that very weak f6 pawn, but it gets pressured again. Bishop d4, king to g7, and then we see rook to d1. That's the a rook to d1 sliding over, and after d6, trying to get that bishop back into the game. The best move, rook d3, threatening to maybe swing over to h5, but actually after the bishop moves, the rook swings over to the f file to put more pressure on that very weak f pawn. Currently only defended by the king and the rook. Black has another choice here. How does he choose to defend himself? The agent's saying something like rook to e5 to sacrifice the rook, but it's very annoying to give back all that material when you are up a queen. I mean, the queen you're up is very sad. It's on the edge of the board, languishing over there, doing absolutely nothing. So we see bishop to b5, trying to win more material. We can see Chernikov maybe a little bit greedy here, allowing all these sort of tricks and such. And Nezhmetdinov decides to go bishop to c3, goes back, hits the tempo on the queen. So the queen goes back to d8, completely undeveloping. But the queen is actually now defending f6, should things go horribly wrong. So she knight takes f6, threatening some sort of nasty discoveries with that bishop on c3. But now Chernikov plays a bit of an odd move. He has his rook to capture if he really wants to. Probably not the best move, but he decides to go bishop to e2. Now forking both of the rooks, no matter what white does. But he must have missed one resource. A beautiful move from Nezhmetdinov, the second sacrifice of the game. Knight takes h7 check. And this knight, in fact, cannot be captured. If you want to grab that knight, you've got rook slamming into f7, king to h6, and you've got bishop to g7 check. King will go up to h5, and now you're just losing that rook on e6. Of course, you can't just go straight back because you're again losing that rook. But the best move is played. King to g8. Black decides not to capture that knight, but the pain doesn't stop there. He continues. Rook to h3, threatening to move that knight back and deliver a checkmate on h8. So things are still looking very dicey for the black pieces. We see rook to e5, the best move, trying to get some sort of trade on the h-file. But that square, if you're just going to get forwards and rooks going back, it's hard to really place a rook on that square. Of course, rook gets harassed. f4, reopening or attempting to reopen that lovely diagonal of that dark squared bishop that's controlling so many key squares and dissecting that black position. Bishop takes f1. Chernikov decides to take the rook. He's saying, all right, whatever, you can take my rook or take the bishop. I'm still going to be up material and I'm completely happy here. So king takes, recapturing the bishop. And now we see rook to c8, trying to get rid of this absolute demon bishop on c3. Maybe even going to sacrifice and try and say the queen and the rook will be better than the minor pieces in the endgame. But Nezhmetdinov does not allow it. He goes bishop to d4, making sure that bishop cannot be lost. Chernikov continues with b5, which is a bit of a strange move, to be honest. With all this pressure on the king side, you want to try and trade pieces, or at least try and relieve some of this horrible pressure on your king. But b5, some sort of queenside expansion, maybe trying to trap this bishop in the long run, just seems a bit out of touch position to me, and immediately gets punished with knight to g5, threatening that f7 pawn. Chernikov defends it with the rook, but it didn't matter. That pawn couldn't be defended. We see bishop takes f7, the rook recaptures, and now the pièce de résistance, the idea of the sacrifice, rook to h8 check. Now it would be checkmate apart from one thing, the rook could be captured. Now we see the idea, knight takes f7 check, forking the house and the kids. The queen is lost, the rook is also lost, but of course you're going to be grabbing that queen. King goes to g8, queen is now lost. Now you can grab a pawn, but after the knight comes back, everything is defended. Rook to f4 check, doesn't matter. King to e2, the pawns are level, and these two minor pieces are just going to outperform this rook, especially with the slightly worse pawn structure. This is a completely winning endgame for white, so Chernikov decided to resign the game. So unfortunately, sacrifice didn't end in checkmate, but not all of them do. Managed to eventually transition to a winning endgame after sacrificing a queen for a bishop. When have you ever seen anything like it? Definitely one of the most intriguing and crazy games in chess history. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one, and I'll see you all in the next video.